September 11, 2001, and make sure Al-Qaeda could not use Afghanistan. Good afternoon. I want to speak today to the unfolding situation in Afghanistan, the developments that have taken place in the last week, and the steps we're taking to address the rapidly evolving events. My national security team and I have been closely monitoring the situation on the ground in Afghanistan and moving quickly to execute the plans we had put in place to respond to every constituency, including the rapid collapse we're seeing now. I'll speak more in a moment about the specific steps we're taking, but I want to remind everyone how we got here and what America's interests are in Afghanistan. We went to Afghanistan almost 20 years ago with clear goals. Get those who attacked us on September 11, 2001, and make sure Al-Qaeda could not use Afghanistan as a base from which to attack us again. We did that. We severely degraded Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. We never gave up the hunt for Osama bin Laden, and we got him. That was a decade ago. Our mission in Afghanistan was never supposed to have been nation building. It was never supposed to be creating a unified, centralized democracy. Our only vital national interest in Afghanistan remains today what it has always been: preventing a terrorist attack on America's homeland. I've argued for many years that our mission should be narrowly focused on counterterrorism, not counterinsurgency or nation building. That's why I opposed the surge when it was proposed in 2009 when I was vice president. And that's why as president, I'm adamant we focus on the threats we face today in 2021, not yesterday's threats. Today, the terrorist threat has metastasized well beyond Afghanistan. Al-Shabaab in Somalia, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, al-Nusra in Syria, ISIS attempting to create a caliphate in Syria and Iraq, and establishing affiliates in multiple countries in Africa and Asia. These threats warrant our attention and our resources. We conduct effective counterterrorism missions against terrorist groups in multiple countries where we don't have permanent military presence. If necessary, we'll do the same in Afghanistan. We've developed counterterrorism over-the-horizon capability that will allow us to keep our eyes firmly fixed on the direct threats to the United States and the region, and act quickly and decisively if needed. When I came into office, I inherited a deal that President Trump negotiated with the Taliban. Under his agreement, U.S. forces would be out of Afghanistan by May 1, 2021, just a little over 3 months after I took office. U.S. forces had already drawn down during the Trump administration from roughly 15,500 American forces to 2,500 troops in country. And the Taliban was at its strongest militarily since 2001. The choice I had to make as your president was either to follow through on that agreement or be prepared to go back to fighting the Taliban in the middle of the spring fighting season. There would have been no ceasefire after May 1. There was no agreement protecting our forces after May 1. There was no status quo of stability without American casualties after May 1. There was only a cold reality of either following through on the agreement to withdraw our forces or escalating the conflict and sending thousands more American troops back into combat in Afghanistan, lurching.
I think I'm okay with Afghanistan being taken over by the Taliban. I don't feel like it's a victory. I don't feel like it's a success. I don't feel like it's a failure. I feel like it's just Afghanistan. That's just Afghanistan. If all the national security and the troops and everything that was put in place, if that didn't become an institution, and so the national police and the national military didn't stand up to the Taliban, that means the people wanted the Taliban the whole time. And if that's the case, that the people want the Taliban, they just, the Taliban's been fighting this shit for 20 fucking years, then all right, then Afghanistan is Taliban. Let's see what the fuck Taliban has to do. But now, what we can do right now is we can support with weapons and we can support with diplomatic support. But with the war is fucking bullshit. I'm going to make 2 points. There's 2 points. The best thing that Gerald Ford did was get out of Vietnam. The fall of Saigon, Saigon needed to fall. Saigon should never have been propped up. Saigon was fictional to begin with. What the fuck? There's Ho Chi Minh City. What the fuck is Saigon? Saigon ain't shit. Saigon is the city that the U.S. created and the French and the imperialists created in order to say, well, we got to save Saigon. What do you mean? The city that you took over? Save Saigon? Save yourselves? And when there's they pulled the purse strings, so Gerald Ford got in there, and I think he was against it, but Congress pulled the purse strings. They had a little bit of money left over for an evacuation plan, but that's it. We're not going to spend any more money for blood or for guns or bullets or tanks and this and that. No more napalm. Nope, we're not killing Vietnamese no more. We'll have money for an evacuation plan, and that's it. And then there's Operation something Fury. And so people are making a comparison, which is accurate since the Taliban is in Kabul right now. Afghanistan, that's like the fall of Saigon. It is exactly like the fall of Saigon. It's Ho Chi Minh City, so there is no Saigon today. Some people say it's a liberation, whatever. Either way you want to look at it, but Saigon did fall, and Saigon needed to fall. And I think Ho Chi Minh City is what isn't that what it's known today as, Ho Chi Minh City? But it doesn't that doesn't matter because Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon needed to fall. Kabul, I don't know if Kabul needs to fall. It's not exactly the same thing, but there's the other comparison. So you got Vietnam, but I want to compare it to the 20-year occupation of Haiti. So there's already a current year, 20-year occupation of Haiti and coup d'etats, and so that was a terrible ordeal, and it wasn't good. I think the U.S. forces stole all the gold in Haiti during the 1915 to the 1935, somewhere in those dates. The U.S. occupied Haiti, and so for 20 years, Woodrow Wilson started the occupation, and then eventually I think FDR ended it, 35. So, but for 20 fucking years, the United States government occupied Haiti. For what purposes? For what ends? Did we do good? Did we do bad? I think it's good that we ended the occupation. It was 20 years, and if you're against imperialism and you're against occupation, you would be against every bit of it. But if the justification at the time is that they had 7 presidential assassinations in 3 years or some shit. So they just in 3 years, 7 and 7, 8 presidential assassinations in 7 years, something crazy like that. So just a shit ton, a fucking handful of presidents got assassinated, and then the U.S. intervened. So it seemed like fuck, right? 8 goddamn fucking presidents after 1 or 2 presidents, but 8 presidents got assassinated. Somebody needed to do something. This shit was, out of fucking control. And so I think that there is justification for some stability, for a moderating force. But, I'm on the side of questioning occupation and imperialism and oppression. But the reason why I bring this up is because let's assume, actually it was the worst, let's assume that the occupation, the 20-year occupation of Haiti was terrible for Haiti, terrible for the Haitian people. It just, created no goodwill, just a bunch of bad will. So it just pissed them off. They kept getting more and more pissed off and madder, poor and poor, more brutalized, more angrier. And so then we left. So at first, the occupation may seem like it's going to be going forever. This is our country. This is our nation. And you came here and you're doing this. You're stealing the gold and you're brutalizing our people. Yeah, but we're building airports and fucking shit too. Yeah, right. Are you actually, is your shit more positive than negative or what? What is the actual purpose for you being here? For the bankers to steal the gold? So because we left, let's assume the 20-year occupation of Haiti was absolute dreadful, terrible, did nobody any good whatsoever. It was a miserable failure. So us leaving would be the best fucking thing we could have done. And then when we left, Haiti is for Haiti. Haiti did for Haiti. So whatever happened with Haiti once we left is what the Haitian people, it's what the institutions, we try to set it up, but ultimately the country has to be a self-determining country, a self-determining nation. So the nation has to stand up on its own 2 feet. If somebody just keeps on falling down every single time, you know, that you help them back up, why keep helping them up? You just fucking fell down. I just fucking helped you, Jesus Christ. But if Haiti, you know, can learn to stand on its own 2 feet and be its own nation, so ultimately the U.S. occupation, let's debate, you know, the one in 1915, the first occupation, was it good or bad? I would say it was a bad thing, and then it's bad today. So it's bad then, and it's bad today. So if it was bad then that means us ending the occupation would be a super good, and that's absolutely true. So I feel like it's Afghanistan. We've been in there for 20 fucking years, so that's very comparable. If we did, you know, make some inroads, if we did help the thing, apparently there's a lot of dumb shit, So, you know, let's let Afghanistan be for Afghanistan. We'll defend ourselves or whatever. So, you know, hopefully they don't fucking send rockets and missiles overseas to attack us for anything that has happened. And the occupation is over. So now it's up to Afghanistan. If Afghanistan wants the Taliban to take over every fucking thing, okay, the Taliban's back in control. Now, are they going to be as fucking shitty and terrible as they were before? But you've been Americanized for at least 20 years. Is there going to be any kind of Americanization with the Taliban? Or are they going to be just as fundamentalist and oppressive and, you know, criminal? There's a lot of fucking criminal shit that they were doing as they were before. Is it all going to change? So I think it's up to Afghanistan. Let Afghanistan figure out Afghanistan shit. What America can do right now is we can accept Afghanistan refugees. Somebody suggested to put a down payment on a house and to give them 2 years worth of income. I'd be in favor of doing anything and everything like that. We were in Afghanistan for 20 fucking years. In fact, the refugee program, getting them 2 years of income, so what? Just get them, what, $100,000. So let's bring in the Afghanistan refugees and give them $100,000 and let them, you know, get their own fucking start. The Taliban, you know, comes in. These are the people that, you know, loved America, believed in America. Now the fucking Taliban's there. They're scared. They don't know what the fuck's going to happen. We need to be there for them. We just wrecked their country. We was just in their fucking country. What the fuck ever, right? Whether you agree with the occupation or the withdrawal or what the fuck ever, we were there doing something, right? So I don't believe we should be there. I'm against occupation. I'm an isolationist, and so I don't like the empire. I don't like these wars of aggression. I don't like none of this fucking bullshit. And so I'm happy that Joe Biden had agreed with Donald Trump's initial fucking thing of getting out. He didn't agree with Somalia. We're bombing Somalia. We're, you know, no telling what other nations were bombing. I haven't been looking too closely at this, but I've heard that verified over and over again. So we're bombing Somalia. So don't you worry. If you're like, oh shit, you neocons and you neo-fucking liberal war hawk motherfuckers, if you're like, oh shit, where's our imperialism? You know, is it going to be Syria? You know, people are getting mad about that too. And Afghanistan, Iraq. God, if we can't occupy the world, then we're not going to have an empire no more. That'd be okay. The United Nations, the greatest generation, the gift that the greatest generation gave to America was the United Nations to prevent one nation from invading another nation. So I know we're like the pit bull, we're like the main engine, the main force for the United Nations. So ultimately, like, I mean, if America doesn't back the United Nations thing, the United Nations thing doesn't fucking happen. So in a way, the United Nations is currently the face of America. So the propaganda with the United Nations is bullshit. The only authority I give to the United Nations is to make the determination as a world body. As a world body. So what, we have 200 countries? 200 fucking countries? If 190 countries out of 200 countries says that one country invaded another country and they need to fucking stop, I'm going to believe 190 countries over the 10 countries that thought otherwise. So when the whole entire world says that one country invaded another country and the entire world needs to be on the side of protecting the sovereignty of, you know, the country that got invaded, then we need to listen to the United Nations. I think the United Nations is a wonderful world body for the United States to be a part of. I don't want to, you know, see United Nations troops invade America or anything like that. And it's also more equitable, more diplomatic. It's more fair. It doesn't put American troops, a target on American troops. It put a target on everybody's troops. The blue helmets, I guess, the blue United Nations helmets. Ho Chi Minh City or Saigon. Okay, so I guess some people still call it Saigon. But Ho Chi Minh City, why wouldn't you? That's the fucking revolutionary. Ho Chi Minh City wrote a letter to motherfucking Truman. He didn't give a shit then, did he? So, Ho Chi Minh City. That is the fall of Saigon. So, whatever, it doesn't matter. Somebody was saying it's the liberation of Saigon, not the fall of Saigon.
Into the third decade of conflict.
So, I'm happy that we're talking about ending the authority for the militarization of use force for 2001, which was the Iraq War, or 2003. One of them, we were questioning, one of them is up. I think the Iraq War one is up, but the War on Terror is still going to go strong. If we can get rid of the War on Terror authority to use military force, that's the better one. But here we're getting out of Afghanistan. We're talking about getting, rid of the authority to use force, which was the justification for the Iraq War. These are exciting developments. I am happy about this. I hope that it's not too terrible for the Afghanistan nation. If the Afghanistan nation doesn't want the Taliban to take over their country, then they can fight back. And they could say, no, we are going to fight back in the name of, the Republic, in the name of democracy, in the name of something that's more powerful than the word Taliban. Anything that's more powerful than the word Taliban. Fight for that. And if there's no other thing that you could think of as more powerful than the Taliban, then you're fucking Taliban, motherfucker. Jesus Christ. You're a Taliban. You've been a Taliban nation. They've been fighting forever. You admire them. You're happy that America's leaving, and you're happy that the Taliban's in control now. Now everything will be just as the way it was, and it'll be back to normalcy, and it'll be just fine and dandy. Don't worry, Afghanistan. Don't worry. The Taliban is back in control, So I hope that it's not too bloody, and if they're against it, stand up and fight against it. I mean, I hear they're just laying down their fucking guns. 75,000 Taliban soldiers are taking on 300,000 national Afghanistan, police and military. But apparently they like the Taliban so much or respect the Taliban so much, they're just putting their fucking guns down and letting the Taliban essentially take Afghanistan over without firing a single shot. So I guess that's some respect or some shit, right? Okay, Taliban, you just fucking kicked the... But we've been in there for 20 years. I don't know. It's not really... They didn't really kick our asses. And then I also heard that it wasn't a 20-year war, but 21-year wars that, went on for 20 years.
Conflict. I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces.
Pardon me, I did hear that Donald Trump was trolling Biden, saying he should resign in disgrace over what's going on in Afghanistan. But Joe Biden is following Donald Trump's lead. Donald Trump signed the fucking agreement to get the troops out, and he is just honoring that agreement. So basically, Joe Biden has to make a decision. Do we withdraw and get out of Afghanistan? We've been in there for 20 fucking years, or do we re-up on the war? And do we continue the occupation? I don't feel... I don't have the stomach... I didn't have the stomach for 10 years of war, 1 year of war, 2 or 3 years of war with Afghanistan, let alone 20 fucking years. So... yeah, I don't have the stomach for another decade and another 20 fucking years. Jesus, I'm sick of these forever wars. I'm sick of the empire. I'm sick of the forever wars. I'm sick of fascism. And I'm, dreadfully frightened by what the U.S. troops are doing all over the world in our name. Just stealing people's gold and silver and emeralds and shit. Blood diamonds. Or are we actually, giving them democracy and a republic and a constitution and a system that works?
That's why we're still there. We were clear-eyed about the risk. We planned for every contingency, but I always promised the American people that I would be straight with you. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight. If anything, the developments of the past week reinforced that ending U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan now was the right decision. American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves. We spent over $1 trillion We trained and equipped an Afghan military force with some 300,000 strong, incredibly well equipped, a force larger in size than the militaries of many of our NATO allies. We gave them every tool they could need. We paid their salaries, provided for the maintenance of their air force, something the Taliban doesn't have. Taliban does not have an air force. We provided close air support. We gave them every chance to determine their own future. What we could not provide them was the will to fight for that future. There's some very brave and capable Afghan special forces units and soldiers. But if Afghanistan is unable to mount any real resistance of the Taliban now, there is no chance that 1 year, 1 more year, 5 more years, or 20 more years of U.S. military boots on the ground would have made any difference. Here's what I believe to my core. It is wrong to order American troops to step up when Afghanistan's own armed forces would not. The political leaders of Afghanistan were unable to come together for the good of their people, unable to negotiate for the future of their country when the chips were down. They would never have done so while U.S. troops remained in Afghanistan, bearing the brunt of the fighting for them. And our true strategic competitors, China and Russia, would love nothing more than the United States to continue to funnel billions of dollars in resources and attention into stabilizing Afghanistan indefinitely. When I hosted President Ghani and Chairman Abdullah at the White House in June, and again when I spoke by phone to Ghani in July, we had very frank conversations. We talked about how Afghanistan should prepare to fight their civil wars after the U.S. military departed, to clean up the corruption in government so the government could function for the Afghan people. We talked extensively about the need for Afghan leaders to unite politically. They fail to do any of that. I also urged them to engage in diplomacy, to seek a political settlement with the Taliban. This advice was flatly refused. Mr. Ghani insisted the Afghan forces would fight, but obviously he was wrong. So I'm left again to ask of those who argue that we should stay, how many more generations of America's daughters and sons would you have me send to fight Afghanistan's civil war when Afghan troops will not? How many more lives, American lives, is it worth? How many endless rows of headstones at Arlington National Cemetery? I'm clear on my answer. I will not repeat the mistakes we've made in the past. Mistake of staying and fighting indefinitely in a conflict that is not in the national interest of the United States, of doubling down on a civil war in a foreign country, of attempting to remake a country through the endless military deployments of U.S. forces. Those are the mistakes we cannot continue to repeat because we have significant vital interest in the world that we cannot afford to ignore. I also want to acknowledge how painful this is to so many of us. The scenes we're seeing in Afghanistan, they're gut-wrenching, particularly for our veterans, our diplomats, humanitarian workers, for anyone who has spent time on the ground working to support the Afghan people, for those who have lost loved ones in Afghanistan, and for Americans who have fought and served in the country, serve our country in Afghanistan. This is deeply, deeply personal. It is for me as well. I've worked on these issues as long as anyone. I've been throughout Afghanistan during this war, while the war was going on, from Kabul to Kandahar to the Kunar Valley. I've traveled there on 4 different occasions. I've met with the people. I've spoken to the leaders. I spent time with our troops. and I came to understand firsthand what was and was not possible in Afghanistan. So now we're focused on what is possible. We will continue to support the Afghan people. We will lead with our diplomacy, our international influence, and our humanitarian aid. We'll continue to push for regional diplomacy and engagement to prevent violence and instability. We'll continue to speak out for the basic rights of the Afghan people, of women and girls, just as we speak out all over the world. I've been clear that human rights must be the center of our foreign policy, not the periphery. But the way to do it is not through endless military deployments. It's with our diplomacy, our economic tools, and rallying the world to join us. Let me lay out the current mission in Afghanistan. I was asked to authorize, and I did, 6,000 U.S. troops to deploy to Afghanistan for the purpose of assisting in the departure of U.S. and allied civilian personnel from Afghanistan, and to evacuate our Afghan allies and vulnerable Afghans to safety outside of Afghanistan. Our troops are working to secure the airfield and to ensure continued operation of both the civilian and military flights. We're taking over air traffic control. We have safely shut down our embassy and transferred our diplomats. Our diplomatic presence is now consolidated at the airport as well. Over the coming days, we intend to transport out thousands of American citizens who've been living and working in Afghanistan. We'll also continue to support the safe departure of civilian personnel, the civilian personnel of our allies who are still serving in Afghanistan. Operation Allies Refugee, which I announced back in July, has already moved 2,000 Afghans who are eligible for special immigration visas and their families to the United States. In the coming days, the U.S. military will provide assistance to move more SIV-eligible Afghans and their families out of Afghanistan. We're also expanding refugee access to cover other vulnerable Afghans who work for our embassy. U.S. non-governmental agencies, or U.S. non-governmental organizations, and Afghans who otherwise are at great risk in U.S. news agencies. I know there are concerns about why we did not begin evacuating Afghans civilians sooner. Part of the answer is some of the Afghans did not want to leave earlier. Still